that. We've got to get past that. The news wants to continue making it about Donald Trump, but I'm not saying good or bad. I am going to say this indictment coming down is a total distraction, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, total miscarriage of justice. I mean, you're talking about the money that Bill Clinton paid out over the time when he was president for the affairs. Obama had his own shenanigans to deal with, and here is Trump. We're talking about a paperwork violation on business applications and reporting. Nonsense. That said, we have some very serious issues to contend with. And there's no one in New Jersey that knows it better than two groups: parents and small business owners. Because parents are dealing with this fight every single day. We've had our schools devolve into something that is wildly different than when any of us went to school. I remember having a discussion with somebody, come on right now, talking about how, Bill, what are you saying about this education? We had sex ed when we were in class. I'm like, we had biology, right? And they embarrassed you with some overhead slides and maybe a chalkboard depiction of something. And we all laughed and giggled, right? Because, especially the boys, we were unruly. But what they're teaching today is completely beyond anything that you would even want to talk to your own kids about. These are things that if you talked about at your place of work, someone would get fired. But they're teaching it to our kids. So that's a big issue, and part of the problem is we have a disconnect. We have a disconnect between our government and a lot of these radical interests and our families and our communities. So when it comes to our small businesses, restaurants like this, the number one issue that I'm hearing, and I'm doing this 2-3 times a day, I've been out on the trail for the last 9 months, because I believe the most important way to fix this state is to be in person, face to face, and do the opposite of what they tried to get us to do when they locked this state down. They wanted us apart. They didn't want us talking. They didn't want us having these conversations because, honestly, we're all normal. We're all normal. We're not radical, agenda-driven politicos. We want to live our lives. We want to build our businesses. We want to protect our families. And most importantly, we want to be left alone. Leave us alone. So what I've learned over the past few months, and here's where I get to the good news. I promised I'd get back to it. So before the lockdowns, before anything happened, I had the #1 radio show in New Jersey, and it was the #1 media audience. Yeah, thank you. I wasn't looking for a cheap clap. I will in a minute. Here's what happened. So before anything happened, we were at around a 4.2 share of the market, which is pretty good in radio. And boom, the hammer comes down, the lockdowns, the governor's executive orders, and all of a sudden life in New Jersey and across the country looked completely unrecognizable. I mean, unrecognizable. So I went on a mission starting in March, really in February, when the first reports of COVID and the cruise ship, if you remember, and only a handful of people died, and we're like, oh, wait a minute, we kind of have a petri dish right here. We kind of know what we're expecting. Great, let's prepare for that. Let's protect the vulnerable, and let's move on. No, it didn't happen that way. Let's lock down the healthy. Let's mask our kids. Let's keep everyone isolated 6 feet apart and act like robots, and that'll solve it. Well, what happened is we had some of the worst results in New Jersey, in New York, and California. All the states that followed this protocol had the highest number of deaths, and I don't have to tell anybody that we lost more than 8,000 seniors behind our nursing home walls. It was a tragedy, it was a travesty, it was a disaster. Should have never happened. But I started on this mission talking about, hey, we need to follow some science here. We've got Sweden that kept all their kids in school. Nobody died, 1.8 million kids. We've got businesses open. Do you know in South Dakota, they never closed the small businesses in South Dakota. They didn't shut their doors, they kept them open. There was something there. Then all of a sudden, Florida, Georgia, Texas started opening. It was April, May, June. And I'm like, wait, something's happening. What's happening in New Jersey? We're locking down even further. More mandates, more aggressive actions against small businesses, families, schools. So I went on this mission, and for a year, every day on the radio, I hammered it to the point where people started calling and saying, could you stop talking about this? I'm like, no. I'm not going to talk about it until we reopen our state, until we get back to normal, because people are actually dying from these policies. So what happened? Management attacking me. I get calls. They're angry. You're going to be fired. What's wrong with you? How can you disagree with Anthony Fauci? What's the matter with you? That happened. Meeting after meeting after meeting. A year later, we did another survey. It went from 4.2 to 9.4. Oh, now that you can clap for. That's pretty good. and I try to balance it, a little entertainment, a little fun, Small Business Mondays, Blue Friday. We try to cover everybody that is a stakeholder in our great communities. But the reason that the numbers jump like that really has nothing to do with me. It has everything to do with the message. People want to hear that someone is going to speak for them, that someone is going to champion their small business, someone is going to stand up for teachers who are pulling out of their own pockets to buy school supplies. Do you know the average teacher is allowed $75 a year for school supplies? That's outrageous. That's outrageous. And sadly, if we go back into political history in this state, Chris Christie did so much damage to the reputation of teachers, it's almost unforgivable. Because he had people all ginned up thinking the teachers were the problem, when in reality, it was the union leaders at the NJEA. And I say that as a pro-union guy when it comes to construction and roads and all the great friends we've made with the IBEW and the PBA, etc. But the NJEA is not a union that represents their members. The NJEA is an advocacy group that is pushing a radical woke agenda, hurting kids. Let's face it, it was the NJEA that wanted our schools to stay locked down. They were making a mint, it didn't matter. So we fast forward, here we are. How is it possible that no one has been held accountable that a third of our businesses closed during COVID, never to reopen? How is it possible that on the same day, I should say the same week, to be fair, it was 24 hours apart, the United States Congress voted to send $48 billion to Ukraine. We're now up to some $150 billion. They voted down a $40 billion package to provide relief to restaurants and small businesses. They did it in plain sight. In plain sight, they laughed at you. They laughed at us. They mocked us. I'm here to tell you the good news. Number one, the show is surging. Why? Because we've got more than 1 million people that agree with you. And they're just the ones that are in the listening area. And now 1 out of 4 of my listeners are on the app, so we're growing. Growing in Northern Bergen, growing in Passaic County, growing in Cumberland and Atlantic and Cape May. And why is that important? It's important because we're filling rooms like this in just about every county in the state. And what that means is change is coming. People want the change. You know, people ask me, they're like, well, so what? You've got the biggest audience in the state. What does it really matter? How are you going to affect change? And I thought that was a fair point. So I launched the Common Sense Club. I did this about a year ago. The Common Sense Club now has 105,000 members. We are the fastest growing grassroots organization in the state, if not the region and the country. It's important because there are 2 things that we focus on. Number 1, small business empowerment. What are we going to do policy-wise to change this state over the course of the next few years before a third of the people in this room leave and head to Florida, head to Pennsylvania? My goodness, you can head to New York and pay fewer business taxes than you pay here. Think about how crazy that is, right? I mean, that to me speaks way more volume than moving to Florida. We need to make New Jersey, Florida without the humidity. I hate the humidity, right? I like 4 seasons. One of the folks at Town Square at our media company today asked me, "Why are you doing all this?" And I said, "Isn't it obvious? I want to stay in New Jersey. That's why. I want to stay here. I live in Princeton, and it's expensive to live in Princeton. My taxes continue to go up." They told us this bill of goods. They said, "No, don't worry. We're going to consolidate the towns, the borough and the township. Your taxes might go up a little bit at first, but don't worry. I think it's been 7 years. I haven't seen a reduction of $1 living in Princeton. And what do I get for it? We get a school system that is so woke, they're encouraging children at a young age, some who are not yet at puberty, to question whether or not they're born in the right body. Oh, is that what I'm paying for? It's amazing to me. And when you travel outside of the state and you travel around the country, you see that people actually can live, believe it or not, in places like Pennsylvania and North Carolina, and they have their trash collected, the water runs, and the lights turn on. And they're paying half the taxes that we're paying. Why is that? It's because government's out of control. And some of the specific policies that we have to get involved with, number 1 is, where are the tax rebates for small businesses? Why are small businesses not treated in cases as homeowners are when it comes to tax rebates? Why are we spending $1 billion? That's right, $1 billion. Rutgers University. Any Rutgers grads? All right. Don't take this as a negative to Rutgers. It's not. It's not. But Rutgers University has a $4 billion budget. $4 billion with a B. There are more than 100 employees at Rutgers that earn more than $1 million in salary.
Correct.
How many of you are taking in $1 million a year? See, you picked the wrong career. Should have been a professor at Rutgers. $1 million a year, more than 100 people. 24%, according to the Rutgers public documents, 24% of that $4 billion comes from us, the taxpayers in New Jersey. It's $1 billion. And they can afford to spend hundreds of millions on a football program that is barely functional. Again, not a knock on Rutgers. I'd like to see them win. I'm not knocking them. But why are we not taking that $1 billion and monetizing the land that Rutgers owns and allow them to put that land back into the local towns to make sure that they become rateables for the town to offset the middle class taxpayers? Why are we not taking that entire $1 billion and dividing it up among small businesses to offer tax credits every time you hire a kid out of high school? Why are we not incentivizing people to go to trade schools and earn skills and work in restaurants and become welders? All of these things are critical to our infrastructure, our society, and our economy. We do none of it. Instead, what do? We throw driver's licenses to illegal aliens. We pay for their college. We pay for their abortions. Now, almost every crowd I'm in, and again, my audience, and this is further good news, only a third Republican. 2/3 of my audience are split as independents and Democrats. So it's not just Republicans hearing this message. I meet a lot of small business owners that are Democrats. Either they hate Trump, or they grew up like I did in a household where all my uncles were union welders and mechanics and everybody else. And everybody was a Democrat. It was a cultural thing. But now is the opportunity, because the Democrats are not the party of your fathers, your grandfathers, or even the last 5 years. Honestly, I miss Obama. Like Obama. Well, that did not get a great reaction. Sorry, guys. I don't want to upset you. But it wasn't as radical when President Obama was in office. It was divisive. I think that the racial tension increased, sure, all of that. But today, we have someone in the White House who is unrecognizable as an actual head of state. I mean, he can't walk down or up the stairs. You can't keep a coherent sentence. I think it's elder abuse, what's going on in the White House. He's being used as a pawn of these elites. It's frightening to watch. We're the laughing stock of the world. Meanwhile, $150 billion later, we're propping up this corrupt regime in Kiev, and you haven't gotten a dime back from what you suffered from under COVID. How about all of those businesses that never reopened? Where's their money? Where are their reparations? Where's their, hey, we're sorry, we crushed you for 2 years, but no, we're going to spend the money in Ukraine. We're going to spend the money on free college, on free abortions. Our priorities are a mess. And we got to get it back. So people ask me, how are you going to fix small business? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we are focused, laser focused on this election in 2023. A lot of people want to talk about 2025. We're not there yet. We need to talk about 2023. In 2022, the media told you there was no red wave and Republicans got beat. And the reason they were able to say that is they set up a false narrative. The false narrative was, they likened it to 1994. Now, I'm old enough to remember 1994, the year that the Democrats lost control of the House after controlling it for 40 years. And 94 was important. Why? Well, unlike 2022, in 1994, we actually counted votes on election night. And we knew who the winners were. So on election night in 1994, we saw a turnover of 54 House seats. It was a dramatic gain, took back the House, and it was all based on the contract with America. Remember that? Newt Gingrich. Why? He had a policy plan. We're going to lower taxes. We're going to empower families. We're going to empower businesses. We're going to do all these things. And here's the list. Vote for the list. And it worked. In 2022, there wasn't a list. There wasn't a list. There was Trump, not Trump. Let's not talk about Trump too much. Let's be afraid of the issues. Let's not really campaign on anything. Same thing happened in 2021. What was the message in 2021? There was one message from our gubernatorial nominee. The message was, Phil Murphy said publicly, and he ran an ad on it continuously for 6 months, if taxes are your issue, we're not your state. Well, here's a funny thing that I've learned about living in New Jersey pretty much my whole life. I've lived in Boston, I've lived in DC, but my wife and I was born in Camden, grew up in Cherry Hill, Camden County, and I settled in Princeton. I've lived in 5 counties. I love New Jersey. But most New Jerseyans don't actually hate taxes. They want their taxes to be an investment. How many times you said, yeah, I could go to West Virginia, but then I'd live in West Virginia. I'll pay a little bit more for the premium of living in New Jersey. It's like the decision of staying at the Motel 6 versus let's do Holiday Inn Express. We don't have to go all the way up to the Ritz. The problem is we're staying in the Holiday Inn Express. They're treating it like it's a Motel 6, but you're paying for it as if you're staying in the Ritz. That's the problem. That's the problem. We have to fix that. First thing you have to do is we've got to lower the budget. How do you do that? Well, you've got to lower the budget by, number one, doing a full audit of Horizon as a healthcare company. Do you realize the state health plan, and it's not just Horizon, there are a few others, but essentially they've created a near monopoly on our state health plan. 800,000 retirees are in the health plan, and the way they do it is that Horizon takes that well visit. So you go as a state employee. Any state employees here? So you'll know what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
You go and you pay $15 for your copay. Well visit, that's great. Thanks, doc. Feeling great. And the doc turns around and charges the insurance company $100. So they say, great, well, we got your 15, that covers 15, we'll pay you 85. Here's the problem. The health insurance company turns around and bills the state a couple $100 for that visit. All told, and I had a great conversation with my friend Doug Forrester, who has been helping us. Remember Doug?
Yes.
Remember Doug? He ran for governor, spent like $40 million. That's a hangover. He lost, right? $40 million of his own money. But Doug is a good man, and he understands this from a detail level. He was the pension guy under Tom Kaine, the former governor. And he said, we estimate that it's somewhere between $6 and $7 billion for this state health plan to be managed. That money needs to stop. Competition needs to be opened up. We need to be able to compete with this across state lines and lower that number by half, and it can be done. You can save $2 or $3 billion overnight, but we don't have the will of the legislature to do it. Why? Because both Republicans and Democrats take money from you-know-who. The lawyers, the insurance companies, big pharma, big hospitals, they're all taking money, and that fuels their reelection. We have to break that cycle. So what did we do? 2022. They told us it was all going to be bad news. It wasn't. We were successful in 447 victories among school board members across the state. 447 wins. Moms and dads, mostly who had never run before, never thought about running, but they ran and they won. Another couple hundred council seats and mayors. Some where we actually defeated incumbent Republicans and replaced them with better Republicans. That's okay. The party doesn't always like when I say that. But that's the reality. We need better leaders. Let's start with, let's have leaders instead of political hacks that are just taking money to perpetuate their own victories. We have, in my opinion, the greatest state in the country. We've got the culture, the people, the pizza. People go, the number one complaint in Florida, pizza. You can't get pizza. I don't know. I think that there's something to be said about the Italian restaurants here, right? But the reality is that we have an incredible opportunity. We have hundreds of thousands of small businesses. Small businesses employ half of all the employees in the entire state. The challenge in our state is too many people don't think we can take it back. 7 out of 10 moves are out of state. It's kind of depressing if you start to look at it. But then we started drilling into it. We said, well, what's really going on here? People aren't voting. That's what's going on here. In 2021, only 4 in 10 voters turned out to vote. 60% said, I don't like either of these guys. I'm staying out, and I got my exit plan. I don't know about you, but I'm digging in. I'm not going anywhere. I've got 2 kids. My daughter is engaged, living in London. She's been there 7 years, and we would love for her to come back to the States. But the idea of coming back to New Jersey gets a bit of a laugh every time we bring it up, because it's about how would I afford to buy that house, to raise a family? Where are the job opportunities? Everyone is struggling. Why would you move into the most expensive spot with no real return on the investment of your tax dollars? My son lives in Southern California. He's a sophomore at San Diego State. Again, he's like, Dad, maybe I'll move as far back east as Texas. That's probably about as far as I'm getting. And the frustration is, I'm like, no, Michael, there's opportunity here, but we have to fix it. So step one is we're going to focus in 2023, and we're going to make sure that we elect dozens more council members, mayors, commissioners, because local is where it's at. Businesses and school boards survive when local leaders are strong. Most businesses, they don't know they're a member of the assembly. They know the mayor though. They know the planning board. They know the building inspector. They know all those folks, because they're the ones that slow down your progress. They're the ones that can make your life miserable. They're the ones that can actually pave the way, make it easier when you want to add parking spaces, you want to add employees, all these things. It happens at the local level. The second thing is we are close to a majority in both houses, believe it or not. 6 seats down in the Senate and 7 seats down in the Assembly. But the reason the Republicans sometimes get mad at me is I say, look, we don't just want a majority. We want a majority of the folks that are going to speak for small business. They're going to speak for mom and dad. We've had too many politicians that rubber stamp whatever the majority does to take a couple scraps off the table. We're done with that. We're done with that. We're going to fight hard in 2023 and then again in 2024 to make sure that we are on our way to a majority that embraces common sense policies. Common sense policies mean I don't want to tear down the Department of Education. I want to replace everybody at the Department of Education and stop this woke provocation against parents. No, the schools should not be keeping the gender identity of 8-year-olds from mom and dad. It defies common sense. We've gone way beyond normal. It's not right. So that's an enormous problem. And by policy, they can do that. And teachers that I talk to, we hold teacher town halls across the state. Teachers are upset because they don't want to be involved with this. But more important, the practical side. 482 bridges in New Jersey are labeled as structurally deficient. That means they could collapse at any time. We all saw what happened in Minnesota. You know, just a few months ago, it happened in Pennsylvania, a mile from where Biden was giving his $1 trillion infrastructure lecture. So the question is, in New Jersey, what do we do? What do we do with COVID funds? What do we do with the money that we have gotten? Well, we didn't spend it on roads and bridges. And it was the same reason why I opposed the gas tax years ago, because the government lies to you. They tell you that we're going to allocate this money, we're going to spend the money. What they don't tell you is they get to decide what programs are worthy. So we still pay between $1 and $2 million a mile of road. Massachusetts, you'll pay about $700,000. And guess what? The workers are earning more. It's not the prevailing wage. It's not the PLAs. It's the bureaucracy. It's the corruption. It's the layer upon layer of government. It takes years on end to get some of these projects through. How many local shops tried to get a building permit and it took 6 months, 8 months, 9 months? We have a government bureaucracy that drags this state to a grinding halt, and we've got to fix it. The only way to fix it is ground up. We've got to elect at the school board, elect better mayors, elect better commissioners, elect better council members, elect better legislators, and eventually start to apply the pressure that the legislators in Pennsylvania and Texas applied to both their governors toward the end of the lockdown to get them to reopen the states. People give Greg Abbott credit in Texas. The reality is it was the legislature. Governor Wolf was taken to task by the legislature and was sued and had to retract many of his lockdown mandates. But it wouldn't have happened if the people in those states didn't aggressively organize at the local level and build up. We need to cut our corporate business tax. We need to cut it in half. We ought to zero it out for small businesses with under 25 employees. Why are you being double taxed? Why are you being taxed on your income? You're being taxed on your corporation. All of this. And what happened? Pennsylvania, with some of the most liberal policies at the executive level, cut theirs to 4.99%. They're less than half of us. Even Governor Cuomo in New York cut the corporate business tax there to attract business across the Hudson. So if the Democrats understand that lowering taxes actually drives incentive and drives business opportunity, why don't the Republicans understand it? We should be only proposing these kinds of policies. But we're not going to wait till we elect a new governor. We're not going to wait till we have a majority in the legislature. We're doing it now, and we're doing it locally, and we're fighting back. And I can tell you, with 105,000 members in the Common Sense Club, with businesses across the state and groups like this gathering from Cape May County to Sussex County to Morris County to Ocean County, this state is ready to come back. So thank you for being here. Thank you for listening to me, and I'm happy to take any questions.